Hello everyone, it's David from Automotive Press, and this week I am super excited because I'm honored to drive two really fascinating sports sedan. One is a 2024 Acura TLX Type S with 355 horsepower, 3-liter turbocharged engine, and the other one is also 2024, but this is an Alfa Romeo Giulia in the Quadrifoglio format with a 2.9-liter bi-turbo engine with 505 horsepower. And these two cars approach the definition of a sports sedan from a very different perspective. The Japanese-American model built in the US. This is a pure Italian sports sedan, engineered and built in Italy. And this one is a true high-performance model with a raw sports car feel, a little bit like a Maserati DNA, but this one has a more of a balanced feel with all-wheel drive versus a rear-wheel drive. So two different approaches and two different feel, but they both represent the pinnacle of what sports sedan truly means. So let's get into both of these vehicles. Let me do my usual engineer's audit, and let's go for a drive and see which one of these vehicles I like the best. Let's go. Welcome back. So as I mentioned, I'm very excited to be able to drive both of these vehicles. Although they are quite different in terms of driving feel and character. One is very much an American-Japanese taste, and the other one is definitely a pure Italian feel. And they are both pretty rare, so I'm really fortunate to have access to both. But I'm going to do my usual audit in terms of quality and do the body gap and body alignment check on both vehicles. Even though that might not be a full indication of exactly what's going on in terms of long-term reliability, it is at least reflective of the overall quality in terms of manufacturing. So I'm going to do that. This one is built in the US, the TLX. Let's do a quick check on the gap, as I always do. And I'm going to have to admit right off the bat that for a Honda and Acura, the gaps are not their strength. Nothing wrong with the actual powertrain and the overall quality, but in terms of body integrity and body gaps, that isn't their strength, as I will show you, because the gap's a little bit larger than what you might find in a Toyota product. So that's about 4.1. This is 5 millimeter here, so it's pretty wide, but actually aligned really well, and the quality of the paint is excellent, which I'll talk about in a second. But over here, 4.5 millimeter, back to about 3.9, and then 4.1 millimeters. So gaps are definitely wider than, let's say, in a Toyota Camry. But of course, Acura has a different focus in the sense that they're designing vehicles that has emphasis on making sure the long-term reliability is good, and that is the case with the Acura. So I'm not as worried about the body gaps and so forth, because right here, for example, the fuel caps are really well aligned. But if you go back to the trunk here, it's a little bit better than the doors. It's about 3 millimeters, although alignment is a little bit off here. I did measure this side, it's the same. So now let's go back and take a look at the Alfa Romeo. And you might automatically assume that being Italian, built in Italy, the body quality is not as good as the Acura, but actually they're about the same, or they're actually quite similar, because the body integrity and body gaps are also not their strength. So I've got the Giulia here now, and the gaps are actually a bit better than the Acura TLX at about 4 millimeter, 3.9, 4 millimeter, 4.1, and then a little bit wider here at 4.3. But the trunk is a little bit wider. I don't know why, but they tend to struggle with trunk gaps in many models that I evaluate, about 4.3. So a little bit wider than I would like to see in a high-end model, but actually a little bit better than the TLX in terms of back-to-back comparison. Alignment is not bad, but a little bit off here. The hood is actually a little bit sunken in on this side, but alignment is okay on that side. So once again, both of these models have acceptable quality for exterior, but the gaps are not their strength, with slight edge on the Alfa Romeo. But in terms of paint job, that's a good one to compare, because that would be an important fact for some people who like to drive these high-performance vehicles. And I would say the paint quality is a little bit better on the Acura with a bit less orange peel, but actually very good on the Alfa Romeo as well. I think the paint quality has always been a strength of Alfa Romeo, and they have a pretty thick paint as well, so good quality paint, also really good luster and very consistent. And so paint job is definitely better than the actual body alignment and body gaps on both of them. Again, this one is built in the US, in Ohio. This one is built in Italy, and they both have a different manufacturing philosophy. And in terms of long-term reliability, I think the Acura will win. but just looking at the exterior, they're both about the same. Regardless of the quality of the exterior, one thing you need to know is that in terms of Alfa Romeo, this Giulia Quadrifoglio will be canceled after this model year. So April 2024 is the last month they're going to produce this for North American market, which includes US and Canada. And therefore, you won't be able to buy this high performance version anymore. You can still buy the Giulia, which is this four-door sedan, but not the Quadrifoglio model. And the Quadrifoglio model is the one with a 505 horsepower with a 2.9 bi-turbo engine, beautiful engine, perhaps one of the best engines in the world. And so if you really want to buy an actual Italian sports sedan with a kind of Maserati background, because Maserati and Alfa Romeo are owned by the same company, then buy this before it's too late, because it's probably almost all gone in the North American marketplace. And you know what? If you always wanted something that feels like a Maserati but in an affordable package in a four-door sedan, this is the one to get. On the other hand, the Type S is new for Acura TLX, so even though it's hard to get the allocation, you can actually order one and get one, so you don't need to rush out to buy this one. This will be around for a while. So that is one advantage for Acura, because you're going to be able to actually find one and have access to it. Not the case with the Alfa Romeo. But let's go inside and check out the interior for both models, check the quality of the interior and design as well, and then we take both of them for a drive, and I'm going to tell you which one I prefer or which one I want to buy in the future. So first, I'm inside the Acura TLX Type S, and clearly Acura knows how to design interior. I think in terms of ergonomics, in terms of functionality, well, this is one of the best, other than the fact that we still don't have a touch panel on this one. Perhaps the Achilles heels, because we still have to use the touchpad here, which is okay, but not ideal. And this is something they need to remedy very quickly, because all of us are getting frustrated trying to use this like we used to do it in the past. But aside from that, look at the quality of everything. The stitching, the actual parts fit. There's not a gap anywhere to be seen. The quality of material is excellent. The button feel is really good. Although I'm not too crazy about all the glossy black here, but they kept it to a minimum. It's just here. We don't have it here, thankfully. And then the charge pad is over here. Two nice cup holders. And also, if I do my punch test, nothing loose. And thankfully, this is a softer material as well, compared to, let's say, a Toyota models, which have really moved to hard plastic all of a sudden. But this one has a really good grain, and Honda/Acura does an amazing job of creating a beautiful interior that's also ergonomically friendly and practical at the same time. You get a nice wide center padding here as well. And even though it's not the roomiest sedan in the market for high performance models, it is more than enough for average person. Decent amount of space in the back, and actually a pretty big trunk as well. So interior is well designed, the quality is excellent, the fit and finish is absolutely first class, and it's a true reflection of Honda/Acura's capability that they're able to create something with a true high quality materials and fit and finish. So let's hop into the Alfa Romeo and take a look at the inside. Okay, so now I'm inside the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, and I have to admit, in terms of getting a high performance feel, this is the one. That one might be a little bit more practical, but this one has a beautiful performance-minded interior. So for example, if you look at the carbon fiber trims here, this is what we call the raw carbon, which means it doesn't have the thick clear coat on top of it. And this is an actual carbon fiber where you can actually see the weave going through. And same thing here, raw carbon fiber here, and even around the door handle as well. You get a carbon fiber with a clear coat here on the steering, which is what typically most automakers will use. But this thing is truly unique and beautiful, and also pretty expensive to use this material here. But there's extensive carbon fiber in here, not fake one, but real one. And also, unlike the Acura, we get a smaller but a real touch panel here, so I can actually navigate it. And Stellantis has a pretty good system, just that the whole thing is a bit small. You can see the actual font and everything is way too small for us to be able to see it clearly when you're driving, especially. But reasonably functional, and I'm glad that we still at least have an actual buttons and knob for temperature and various HVAC controls. So that's all good. Two big cup holders here, reasonable size center console, and I like the Alfa Romeo style of the charging pad, which is the type of design where you just slide the phone in and it just stays there. You can see a little bit of the phone sticking out, but it slides in there nicely. And of course, one of the best parts of Alfa Romeo is the steering wheel. It's a beautiful design with just the right size, not too big. Unlike many automakers that tend to have a big steering wheel, the start-stop button for the engine is here, and you get a mixture of carbon fiber and real leather suede here. It's just a beautiful feel to hold on to, and the right thickness. Alfa Romeo knows what kind of steering wheel you have to give that real performance feel. And then, you know what? In terms of actual fit and finish, it's been excellent. I haven't had no problem with any kind of squeaks or rattles while driving it. This is all softer materials as well, and the stitching looks really good. Something that Italians would actually be quite good at. So overall, maybe this is a bit of an issue here, or bottleneck rather, because it's a small screen, but it's usable, and everything else is designed for drivers, kind of driver-focused, performance-minded style. And really, honestly, I love the raw carbon fiber that gives it a real character. But it is a smaller vehicle. You can tell the back seats and everything. It's a bit tighter overall compared to the TLX. That thing is actually quite large. But if you're buying this vehicle because you enjoy performance and you enjoy driving, it probably doesn't matter too much that it is a slightly smaller compared to the TLX. But that one is a more of a practical one, and this is one that makes you feel like you're an Italian sports car. So now I'm driving the Acura TLX Type S first, and I'll drive the Alfa Romeo. And obviously you're going to be asking, how do they differ in terms of performance, in terms of feel, handling, engine performance, all that stuff. So I'll get into more details a little bit later on, but what I can tell you right off the bat is the fact that the biggest difference between the two is that TLX is all-wheel drive versus the Giulia, which is a rear-wheel drive. So if you're in an area that doesn't have snow or slippery condition, then obviously the rear-wheel drive is more ideal to give you that sensation of a beautiful sports sedan. But if you need to drive these vehicles in wintertime and you want it to be an all-season vehicle, then don't pick a high-performance rear-wheel drive vehicle like the Alfa Romeo Giulia, because they're not going to perform very well in the wintertime. So from that perspective, right off the bat, the TLX has a substantial advantage because it is an all-season, all-weather car, so you can enjoy the high-performance feel all year round, regardless of the type of conditions you might have. But in terms of the pure performance, obviously the TLX Type S can't quite match the high potential of the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, because that thing has a crazy power output of 505 horsepower, and also it has a much more of a pure sports car feel, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on once I jump into that vehicle. But if you wanted something that has a little bit more of a balanced feel, which means you get a decent ride and you get a refined feel, then obviously the TLX is a better choice. This is the all-around sports sedan that you can drive every day as a daily driver, and your passengers won't complain because the ride is actually quite comfortable. Still, if you step on the gas or take this vehicle around some twisty corners, especially if I switch over to the sports mode, or you have to kind of hold it and then put it into sports plus mode, then there's a fair amount of change from normal to sport. The sport plus, you can hear the sound of the engine or exhaust is a little bit different, and also the shifting point is changed. The steering feels quite a bit heavier, especially in the sports plus mode, and then the actual mapping of the transmission shift and all that, it's all changed. So it's dramatically different between the normal mode and the sports plus mode. But even in just the sport mode, the TLX Type S feels quite a bit sportier than in the normal mode. So I almost always put it in the sports mode because that's the kind of the best balance. It's not too firm, and yet it's still fun to drive. And this TLX Type S has a pretty good road feel. I get lots of sensation from the road, and the steering is much heavier than in other Acura products. So I'm very appreciate that, because sometimes Acura and also Honda slash Toyota slash Lexus, they all have a steering that's too light these days with almost no feel and no actual feedback. But this one has a really good feel to it, so I actually appreciate that. The engine and transmission also work really well together, and you have your paddle shifter to shift up and down like what I'm doing right now. Not quite as fast as what you'll find in Alfa Romeo, but once again, very comfortable, and you know that you can actually drive this daily and enjoy driving, and yet your passenger will not complain. So now let's jump into the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, and let me tell you the difference, because there is a substantial difference in the feel, because that thing is clearly meant for a true sports car environment versus this one, which is designed to be a balance between a sports car and also being a daily driver. So now I'm inside the Alfa Romeo Giulia in the Quadrifoglio format, which is the most expensive, highest performing model within this lineup. But as I mentioned earlier, this one is getting discontinued after this year. So if you really want to buy this Alfa Romeo in the Quadrifoglio format, you gotta move fast because there's not too many left, and maybe most of them are gone already. But a few things to point out. One is the fact that the TLX is all-wheel drive. This is rear-wheel drive, so that's one big difference. And so if you want to drive this type of vehicle all year round, even in the wintertime, and you get some snow or slippery conditions, then probably not a good idea to drive a very high-performing, high-powered vehicle in the wintertime that is rear-wheel drive, even if you put winter tires on. That's one thing to keep in mind. Secondly, it's almost unfair to compare this one versus the Acura TLX Type S because this one is one grade higher in terms of performance. You get a 505 horsepower instead of a 355 horsepower over there. And in terms of the driving feel, this one is like a pure sports sedan or sports car. I mean, this is as close as you can get to a Maserati sports car without actually buying the Maserati, compared to Acura Type S, which is more of a balanced vehicle. It's more practical, it's more comfortable, it's less like a real sports car, more like a sports-oriented sedan, versus this one, which is really, honestly, is as pure as you can get in terms of performance. The engine, the transmission, the actual shifting with a paddle shifter, as well as the overall feel is phenomenal on this one. I know most of you guys might be a little bit scared to buy an Italian vehicle, especially Alfa Romeo, which doesn't have a good reputation for long-term reliability or maybe even short-term reliability. But if you're going to, let's say, lease a car for 2 or 3 years, or you don't really mind taking the car back to a dealership every so often, then this is the car to buy because it's got such a phenomenal feel. The steering is so accurate. When I wiggle the steering left and right like this, the response is immediate. There's absolutely no delay whatsoever. And you know what? The steering actually feels more accurate and more responsive than even my Lexus Inspiration Series LC500. This one handles better. This one feels more like a pure sports car than even my Lexus LC. That's how good this one is. The engine performance is phenomenal as well. I can't really step on the gas too much right here in the city, but 0 to 60 acceleration time is about 3 seconds. So you are definitely reaching that threshold of being compared to some of the very expensive sports cars like the Porsche 911 or Porsche 718 GTS. All those vehicles cost much more than this one, but this one has the same kind of performance. Most of all, I love the steering feel, the steering character, and the feedback I get. Even though this is an electric power steering and not a hydraulic, it feels like hydraulic power steering with a solid feel. And you know what? Only about 1%, maybe 2% of cars out there can replicate that feel of a hydraulic steering in actual electric power steering cars. So kudos to Alfa Romeo, who truly knows how to build a sports machine that feels good, that feels right, and give you maximum enjoyment when you drive. And then once again, I'll step on the engine a little bit here because I have a bit of a clear road. And I was only about halfway in terms of my accelerator, but wham, the thing takes off, and it's a true joy to drive. I think even though the reliability is a little bit of a question, to be honest, if I were to buy a sports sedan, the one that I want to enjoy driving every day, and I'm not too worried about the winter driving because I have a second car for that, this is the one that gets my vote because, as you know, I love cars that have a real good feel, a real good sports feel, and this one can't be beaten in terms of driving feel because it has so much passion and character, and that's what Alfa Romeo is known for. So one of these days in my life, I feel like I need to own an Italian machine, and Ferrari and Maserati and so forth are all way too expensive. So that brings me back to Alfa Romeo, and so maybe a couple of years later, I will buy either a Giulia or Stelvio in Quadrifoglio format. So these cars are going to be probably a collectible many years down the road because they're so rare. And the quality has gotten much better. I'm hearing that reliability is also improved compared to when they first came out. I'm not as concerned, and you know what, to be honest, I would just rather buy these and buy an extended warranty and truly enjoy the driving than to buy a vehicle that's also very good like the Acura TLX Type S. But it feels too much like other sports sedans out there. That is too close in terms of the feel. But this one is substantially different from anything else. And that's what drives me toward this vehicle in terms of my taste. But for most of you, I'm going to recommend the Acura over this one because it's more practical. You get more space, it's cheaper, and most of all, it's more reliable, and you get all-wheel drive, so you can drive that thing all year round. And also your passengers will thank you because it's more comfortable and not as stiff as the Alfa Romeo. So I hope this was helpful in trying to understand two different approaches to sports sedan, one by Italian automakers that is not known for quality or long-term reliability, but it's the one that can give you something closest to a feeling of an Italian sports car like a Maserati, compared to an Acura, which give you practical, comfortable, very predictable and balanced feel, and also give you all-wheel drive capability, but maybe it's not quite as fun to drive as the Alfa Romeo, but it is also a little bit more affordable. Only you know which one is right for you, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some comments from you guys. And if you haven't done so yet, I would appreciate getting a thumbs up, and also if you haven't subscribed before, would you kindly consider subscribing to my channel so I can talk more about these things to you guys in the future videos. Until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.